Submit yourselves to your masters.
Learned your lesson well?
Oh, yes, sir.
Virginia's Southampton County in 1809. The white race kept the black race in slavery, and black people were regularly mistreated in all wrong ways during this time. Additionally, uneducated, the majority of black people could not read. It appears that black people cannot fight back since white people were more powerful than them in terms of numbers and weapons. This makes it impossible for blacks to rebel. However, a young boy was born named Nat Turner. From birth his parents knew he was special. Nat was born with a birthmark on his body. All the black people believe it to be a symbol of courage and a tough leader. Because of their beliefs, one night his mother carried Nat into the forest. Their arrival was anticipated by a group of black people. There, it was seen that they were going to perform a ritual of blessing to Nat. Sometime after, Nat was seen playing with his employer's son, Samuel, but suddenly Nat found a book. Secretly, he brought the book to his house and immediately started to learn to read it because at that time, many black races could not read, and slave masters wanted to keep it that way. Back then the only thing black people knew was to work as slaves day and night. The next day when Nat and the other children were queuing up to get their food, it turned out that Nat didn't get any food. His father, who felt sorry for his son, then decided to steal food from his employer's house at night so he could feed his son. Unfortunately, when his father had managed to steal the food, he was discovered and confronted by 3 white sheriffs who were on patrol. He panicked, and in the midst of him trying to escape, he accidentally killed one of the sheriffs. For fear of being lynched, he rushed to his house and immediately told of the incident to all his family. With their advice and him having little chance of escaping certain death, he decided to hide. Not long after 2 white men came to their house, they began to inquire about his whereabouts. This was seen as a heinous crime for a black man, who had killed one of their white friends. However, neither his mother nor his wife informed the sheriffs of his whereabouts, as if nothing had happened. The next day, Nat's employer Elizabeth learned that Nat could read. She invited Nat to study in her house. She then gave Nat a Bible to study but kept all the other books from him, fearing that he will gather too much knowledge.
These books are for white folks. They're full of things your kind wouldn't understand.
But before long, with the Bible that Elizabeth had given him, he began to preach fluently in several churches that contain white people. Years passed. Now Nat has grown up and is now working in a cotton field, as well as a man who often preaches. While working with Samuel, Nat saw the 2 sheriffs who had been looking for his father before. The sheriffs asked Samuel about the whereabouts of 2 black slaves who were trying to escape from their employer. That day when Nat finished work, he picked up a doll and was scolded by the owner of the doll and allowed him to go because he saw that Nat was a Negro. On the way home, Nat saw black people being auctioned off as slaves by white people. At that moment, Nat's eyes fell on a slave girl named Cherry. Nat persuaded Samuel to buy Cherry. Samuel finally agreed because coincidentally he needed a slave, and Nat needed a wife. One morning, Nat's mother took Cherry to meet her employer. As we know, the only jobs available for black people is to be a slave. But secretly it turns out that Nat is starting to be attracted to Cherry, and one day Nat gave Cherry a flower. A short while has passed. It turns out that Nat and Cherry fell in love with each other. In fact, when Nat was going to work, he had time to give his grandmother's talisman to Cherry because of his longing for Cherry. Nat then rushed to Elizabeth's house to meet her. There Nat proposed to her. The next day, at Samuel's house, they had a visitor. The guest said that there was a decline in sales of plantation fields. He then suggested to Samuel to deduct all the wages of the slaves who worked in the field, so as not to make him lose money. In addition, they also talked about Nat to come to preach at Joseph Romanoff's house. Samuel and Nat began preaching by reading a verse which said that slaves must submit to their masters with respect, both to a very good master and to a very cruel master. Not only so, then can be said for now, but Nats also still feels sorry for black people who are often suppressed by white people.
To your masters, not only to those who are good and considerate, but also to those who are harsh.
People. Instead, he is defending white people to continue their slavery. But after he finished preaching, he felt sad because he saw a white child who was playing with a black child with his neck tied like a pet dog. Days passed and Nat spent most of them preaching in various places. One day while Nat was preaching, he saw white people being treated sadistically to black people. They were being tortured and force-fed by the white people. All their teeth were extracted. Then they put the food in their mouths like feeding an animal. With a very sad feeling, Nat began to preach in front of the slaves there. Nat was expressing his sad feelings about the treatment of white people to his people. In addition, Nat also gave fighting spirit to all black people to immediately carry out a rebellion on their beds. In this written judgment, on the other hand, Cherry was suddenly approached by 3 white sheriffs. The sheriffs asked about her identity. But because she did not have an identity document, those 3 white people immediately tortured her and beat her in a very brutal way. She was battered. Knowing the condition of his wife who had been injured, Nat immediately went home to see her, Nat who at that time could not allow this slavery to continue. Finally, he immediately intended to take revenge on the person who battered his wife. One night, Samuel's family was having dinner with all their business colleagues. However, one of Sam's friends begins to seduce a black slave girl. Worse, he intends to have sex with her. Knowing the incident, the husband of the woman had pleaded and asked Nat to help his wife immediately. But unfortunately, his efforts were in vain. Because at that time black people did not have the power to fight back, and slave masters or their white counterparts could rape them whenever they want, and nothing could be done about it. One day, Nat was visited by a white man who asked him to baptize him, because during the life he lived, was filled with sins. But with presumptuousness, his close friend, Samuel, even forbade Nat.
We've been good to you. My whole family has. And you go on and do something like this to me. A nigger baptizing a white man on my property.
According to him, a Negro does not deserve to be baptized, and only white people are required to have religious beliefs. Samuel had the heart to bind Nat and
Learned your lesson well?
Oh, yes.
The punishment was witnessed by other black people. He was left tied to the post overnight. The next morning, when Nat was released, Samuel forbade Nat to preach for a while. He told him to focus on working on the farm. As days passed, Nat does the usual work on the farm, but suddenly, he got sad news. His grandmother had died. While he was praying for his grandmother, he found a book containing the doctrine of rebellion. After he read the entire Bible, he then began to invite his friend named Hank to rebel. Then Nat also ordered Hank to invite as many black people as possible to take part in the rebellion. Later, they began to gather in a forest to plan. In the plan, they will take over the armory in Jerusalem. Before carrying out the mission, Nat had asked his family for permission. It was supported by Cherry and his mother, and the rebellion began. When Sam is asleep, he wakes up to hear a voice in his house, and suddenly, Nat appeared and immediately took revenge by attacking Samuel with an axe. The other slaves also killed their masters. After killing their masters, Nat motivates the other slaves to immediately fight and give freedom to the black race. But without them knowing, a boy who participated in the meeting turned out to be a traitor. He told all the white race of Nat's plan. After Nat's group arrived at their intended target, they were shocked. Suddenly the sheriff appeared and surrounded them all. A shootout ensued between the two sides. But in the end, the group led by Nat was cornered because they only carried very limited weapons. The next morning, Nat gave motivation to all his groups. They then rushed to Jerusalem to take over the weapons. But when they got there, it turned out that white troops were waiting for them. This is the result of the act of a small boy who leaked their plans. Finally, the battle broke out again. Not long after, the white troops counterattacked and opened fire on them all from the top of the fort. In the end, all the troops led by Nat were killed, and only Nat had managed to escape. For this incident, the black people who did not participate in the rebellion were effective because the white people began to massacre the black slaves. The masters anticipated that the rebellion would not happen again in the future. Nat, who at that time did not know where to go. He then met Cherry for the last time. He decided to turn himself into the white man. But when Nat had surrendered, they instead ganged up and beaten to a pulp. They assumed that Nat was a provocateur, and worst of all, Nat was given the death penalty by the residents by hanging him. We can see the regretful face of a boy who has reported the incident of the rebellion. Finally, when the boy grew up, he became another rebel leader. That concludes this recap. Please like and subscribe to the channel for more content. Thanks for